and welcome to our look ahead to what the papers will be bringing us tomorrow. With me are the Brexit editor at the Daily Telegraph, Asa Bennett, and the writer and broadcaster Mihir Bose. Welcome to you both. And many of tomorrow's front pages are already in. We start with the FT, which reports on UK inflation rising more sharply than expected in August due to higher fuel prices and more expensive clothing. A trial hears of the terrified pleas of 8-year-old Miley Billingham. Her father is accused of her murder. That's on the front page of the Metro. Genetic testing on the NHS is the headline for the Eye, with promises of a new service of personalised treatments in patients' lives. Chequers as dead as a dodo. The Telegraph reports on one of the Prime Minister's most loyal allies warning Eurosceptics will kill off her Brexit plan. A damning report saying passengers are routinely failed by the rail industry is reported in the Daily Mail. Rail failings are also splashed across the front of the Times. The paper also reports on Mrs May's Brexit plans, creating a rift among EU leaders in Salzburg tonight. The Guardian also features the report on the rail industry, and the paper also echoes the Prime Minister's speech in Salzburg. The onus is on all of us to get a deal done. So quite a variety of front page stories, but, well, what else can we start with but Brexit? And it's interesting that different papers are reporting what's going on in Salzburg in different ways, isn't it? And Asa, the Express is reporting on Mrs May's ultimatum. What do you make of it?
They've definitely summarised it with some brio, because Theresa May has pointed out that, as we know, the British expect and hope to have a deal in the bag by November, so they can get it ratified and approved in time for March, Brexit Day. But of course, there's a bit of a deadlock ongoing due to various things like the Irish border question, namely. And the Prime Minister has made clear to EU leaders tonight over dinner in Salzburg that she's not going to be extending. She doesn't want to have to extend how long they're talking. That's not an option in her words, as you're saying. And what Michel Barnier, the EU's chief negotiator, is putting forward, this idea of basically doing a border down the Irish Sea, is completely unacceptable as well, because simply it would, in her words, carve the United Kingdom in two, and that's something also she's been trying to impress upon the European leaders. The idea of, how would you feel if your king and country was divided in two? Because that's the implication that Michel Barnier is pushing. And this is the thing, it cuts to the core of, it's not just a matter of, mere fripperies and rhetoric, there's a difference here, but it's almost core principles now, because this is something Michel Barnier is bearing down on, and yet he's not quite understanding the depth of unionist feeling about this. That Theresa May now infamously said no UK Prime Minister could ever accept such a proposal. The Democratic Unionist Party, also who prop up her government, they've made clear they see this as a non-starter, having a sort of dividing the country in different regulatory systems. So it's almost like a dialogue of the deaf right now.
Oh gosh, well Mihir, do deal in 2 months or we'll walk? Do you believe her?
Well, I'm not sure if you actually said it quite in that way. I think the Express, it's very interesting. Express has been for leaving very firmly, and I think the Express, like perhaps the most strident of leaf papers, now that the Daily Mail doesn't seem so obsessed with Brexit because of the change in editors, has obviously taken, if you might call it, a hard line, a hard story, made something she said. Obviously we know that by November it has to conclude, and made it into a much harder story than I believe it really is the case. As Asa said, the Irish border is the big issue. In a sense, the customs union and free movement one can sort of fudge around. But this was the one issue that was just not discussed at all during the referendum. Nobody knew about it, and there's the whole question. Yes, Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom, doesn't want to be separated, but there is a separate country called Ireland, which of course has its own, if you like, could play quite tough on this.
I mean, Michel Barnier, his words on the border issue did seem to be softening a little bit. It's whether the reality is matched by the rhetoric.
But also these negotiations have revealed such a gulf. There doesn't seem to be any understanding. That neither side agree on anything. Is there sort of, there's been some talk that Michel Barnier has not been happy with the British negotiators and how they're dealing with things and so on. So how can you come together if you don't even sort of get on
Well, obviously the bottom line both sides like to point out is that 80% of the withdrawal agreement has already been nailed down, but of course the contentious issues that remain are rather tricky to work around, and so that tonight Theresa May has tried her best to push on, being allotted simply a speaking slot at dinner, not a dialogue, but merely a 10-minute address in which she made her pitch of just saying, the onus is now on us to get a deal done, and then they're not responding. Of course, they'll be discussing things without her tomorrow. And it seems like the Prime Minister is just hoping to have some crumbs from the table as a result. That they'll say, well, this Chequers plan you've got, that's very good, it's worth considering a bit more. And the trouble is, they're wanting more compromises now. They are pushing her for more. While the Prime Minister is able to reassure her critics and say, look, I have the most credible plan possible, how are her critics going to feel when they see that Chequers becomes Chequers minus, as she has to compromise even more? And to what extent, given you see Brexiteer ministers in her cabinet remaining in the hope that nothing gets given away, how long can they stay on in this scenario?
Well, it's interesting, because let's move on to the Daily Telegraph. And you mentioned Chequers. The headline there, Chequers, quote, as dead as a dodo. Who's saying this, Mihir?
The person saying it is quite interesting. It's Mike Penning, who planned Theresa May's campaign to become leader and so on.
So a loyal ally.
Yeah, and who's turning around. And he's been very blunt in what he said, that this plan will not work. If it is brought to Parliament, it will not succeed. And basically, he's putting out what a lot of people have been saying for some time. And in the past, it's been said by people like Jacob Rees-Mogg and others, but this is somebody, a Prime Minister's ally, saying it. And one suspects that there are elements perhaps within the Prime Minister's close friends who are beginning to realise that the plan just will not work and it will not win, and so she has to come up with. But what alternative can she come up with? I mean, she's nailed her colours to Chequers.
Well, this is the thing, she's tied herself to that mast, and actually you say what plan could she come up with. The irony is she argues there is no other plan, there is an alternative.
So she's saying if there is an alternative, she has to accept if it's not going to work, she can't bring a proposal, she can't really bring forward a proposal to be voted on, but she knows it's going to be beaten.
But I think in this world of Brexit negotiations, I suspect what's going to happen is that Chequers will be having to be repackaged, put through the mangle in Brussels, but what will come out the other end won't be the same Chequers, of course, because this is a proposal, we must remember, but she will still probably try and pass it off as Chequers. It's derived from Chequers. It may be a mealy-mouthed version, but it's still the same thing. And actually, one of the points that Mike Penning says that's quite striking in my view is he also accuses the PM of trying to blackmail her own MPs over supporting it by using this somewhat, I would even say, tone-deaf argument as she exhibited on BBC Panorama of saying, well, it's Chequers or no deal Brexit. You just leave without a deal. And indeed, that infuriates Remainers.
Yeah, but we have seen during the election when Mrs May changed policy overnight, and she said she hadn't changed policy. So who knows? She might change Chequers and say she hasn't changed Chequers.
The trouble is, she spent months thinking about this and working towards this. This is the accumulation of so much effort. She's survived cabinet resignations galore, two, and other ministers, and who knows what next. So she is obviously notorious for being someone who's not very flexible and agile. So she's unlikely to if she does, turns on a sixpence, then what's Brussels going to think? They're going to say...
The question is, will she face a leadership challenge?
Yes.
And according to the Telegraph, a leaked memo suggests there'll be a challenge to the PM in April.
Yes, and what's been drawn up, this leaked memo, is runners and riders. So
who's in the running?
Well, Boris Johnson is the bookies' favourite.
Right.
Philip Hammond thinks he might, have a go at it, but he's not very hopeful. Liam Fox is thinking that, he did think of becoming leader, or tried to become leader, and Michael Gove. So these are the sort of candidates. The one that I think has been mentioned, but we haven't got it here, is Matt Hancock. He's the sort of outsider, perhaps leader after next or something like that. Considered very bright, and
he's definitely very ambitious and wants to get. He's a man in a hurry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you'd say.
But it's unlikely that he would beat Johnson if the two stood against each other.
Well, as it stands, it's worth making clear that this is not a sort of memo revealing that there's definitely a leadership election in April. It's more a sort of a racing assumption among what we understand to be sort of an MP, and it cuts towards a wider feeling in the party that they know the PM obviously insists she's there for the long term, but the question of when, how long is this long term?
Yes.
In that she's there, she's driven by duty, and maybe is that duty just to deliver Brexit, and then she bows out gracefully, and then the party, because right now Brexit is her fireguard. It's the thing stopping the leader.
She's told us she's going to take us to the elections.
Well,
that's what she said repeatedly.
She has to say that. That's the thing. Otherwise, it's like Vince Cable, who said he's leaving but doesn't know when, and we just live in limbo. So the party's in a very curious state now.
In the meantime, let's talk about inflation, which is the front page of the Financial Times, and it's risen, which was somewhat unexpected from The Economist, which always worries me a little bit when these surprise figures, so-called surprise figures, come out.
Yeah, but those who live on their savings will look forward to it because since 2008 the banks have hardly paid anything on savings. So if inflation has risen more than it was expected to, then maybe they'll start paying some interest on it. Of course, the pound has also gone up.
Right.
And both of them were unexpected. It'll be quite interesting to see what impact this has on the stock market.
Yeah.
Which has been absolutely booming for the last few years.
And inflation has gone up, I think, Asa, because of fuel prices and clothes are more expensive.
Yes, but then also restrained somewhat by sort of mobile phone bills and all sorts. And it definitely shows that while we're obsessing about Brexit, that there is the ever-present of cost of living debate. And given this is something that Jeremy Corbyn and Labour like to make the most of when they point out, the way things are going as we debate things like whether there's a no-deal Brexit, will it send inflation soaring up even more? There is an economy that has to be kept on steady and on track with all this.
But house price rise is falling.
Yes.
I mean, that's quite interesting. So there's some contradictions here.
So the rise is slowing down.
Yeah, the rise is, But, for a few years, even about a year ago, London house prices were soaring away. And despite the big crash, London house prices didn't fall.
Okay, finally, just for now, anyway, we're going to turn to a completely different story, which is on the front of the eye. Genetic testing on the NHS, which, let's be honest, is a fairly arresting headline, isn't it? So, Asa, what's this? It says children and people with blood cancer among first to benefit from, quotes unquote, the holy grail of health.
Yes, now this Holy Grail of Health is a quote from one of the senior doctors behind this, Professor Dame Sue Hill, the Chief Scientific Officer of England. Now, if you remember that doctors are never ones to sort of overstate things, to be salesmen and wave their hands around. So I would say she's onto something when she's using this correct sort of term, because this is truly really quite exciting stuff, genomics, in that we're able to analyse things on a cellular level. Understand the body like never before.
It's the study of the body's genes, isn't it?
And this, the study of the DNA, and sort of very individual study in that sense. So you look at a tumour and you look at what the genes are and what they're showing. So they can, if you like, chart out the thing much better than what they're doing at the moment. At the moment, most medicine is on a more generalised system, if you like. Yeah. Each individual's genes are different, and different groups have their genes and so on. And if you like, it's much more tailored to what a person is like. It's not a off-the-peg suit. You go in and get a really tailor-made health plan for yourself, which should be very good.
Yes, well, on that note, I leave that thought hanging for us all for the moment, because that is it for the papers. As I say, just for the moment. Don't forget you can see the front pages of the papers online on the BBC News website. It's all there for you 7 days a week at bbc.co.uk/papers. And if heaven forfend you miss the programme any evening, you can watch it later on the BBC iPlayer. Thank you for now to Asa and to me here, and thank you too. We'll all be back with a longer review at 11:30, so do join us then. But for now, bye-bye. Hello, this is BBC News with me, Rebecca Jones. We'll be taking a look at tomorrow morning's papers in just a moment, but first, here are the headlines. The Prime Minister arrives in Salzburg to present her Brexit plan to EU leaders. She said the EU will need to evolve its position in order to make Brexit a success. BBC News has learned that a review into maternity errors at Shrewsbury and Telford NHS Trust is now examining more than 100 cases. 2 people have died as Storm Alley brings winds of up to 100 miles an hour to Ireland and parts of the UK. Hello and welcome to our look ahead to what the papers will be bringing us tomorrow. With me are the Brexit editor at the Daily Telegraph, Asa Bennett, and the writer and broadcaster, Mihir Bose. Welcome to you both. And many of tomorrow's front pages are already in. We start with the FT, which reports on UK inflation rising more sharply than expected in August due to higher fuel prices and more expensive clothing. Distressing details from the trial of a man accused of stabbing his 8-year-old daughter are the lead for the Metro. Genetic testing on the NHS is the headline for the Eye, with promises of a new service of personalised treatments transforming patients' lives. Chequers as dead as a dodo. The Telegraph reports on one of the Prime Minister's most loyal allies, warning Eurosceptics will kill off her Brexit plan. A report into the rail industry to be published tomorrow is the main story for the Daily Mail. Rail is also the lead for the Times. The paper also reports on Mrs May's Brexit plans, creating a rift among EU leaders in Salzburg tonight. The review of Shrewsbury and Telford NHS Trust maternity services sees the number of cases being considered climb to more than 100. That's on the front of the Daily Mirror. And too little, too late. The Sun reveals Starbucks paid £4.5 million in tax last year on £162 million of profit. We will return to that story, I've no doubt, in due course, but let us start with Brexit and different interpretations of what's happening in Salzburg, this meeting between Theresa May and the other EU leaders, depending, of course, on what paper you read. The Times, Asa, May's Brexit plan opens a rift among EU leaders, so a rather more positive headline for Mrs May.
Yes, and certainly her team will be having a spirit soaring right now as they think, okay, the Salzburg dinner may have been somewhat brittle this evening as the PM just gave a 10-minute speech at the end of it. They all sit there muted, thank you very much, Prime Minister, you shuffle off now, we'll talk about you behind your back tomorrow. But, and admittedly in this report, some of it is not too new. That shock horror, the 27 EU member states have different opinions behind the scenes, but obviously if you ask them on the record, they'll go, no, Michel Barnier, we're completely behind him, we're happy, we're all singing from the same hymn sheet. But I think some sing different songs, in that, certain member states, Netherlands and Belgium, they want to be more positive, they're thinking maybe now's the time to actually react a bit more positively, engage with the proposals. Donald Tusk, the European Commission President, one of the two chiefs, is very pro this in this report. But in the meantime, France and Germany, hitherto the most hardline member states, remain even more unwilling to give concessions. Now, they are the big fish in the EU pond, so it's looking like, if there may not be much today or over the coming hours when they consider whether to adapt things or what they want to say about the Brexit talks, of course that might also be because it's a very informal summit this week. The real serious thinking is meant to be next month. But in the meantime, they may, the debate will be whether they give her some nice compliments and pats on the head, or what do they do, basically. Because currently the noises coming out are not too welcoming, because they keep wanting more compromises.
Right, okay, Mihir, is that your reading of it as well?
Yeah, obviously different stories are coming out. It's quite interesting that Donald Tusk is quoted as saying here that there are some positive points in the Chequers deal. So far, the EU's message has been Chequers can't work, Chequers is not going anywhere. If he's really saying that, then that may be that there is some way of a compromise. So there are other papers saying that Chequers will have to be, the EU has been consistently saying.
Yeah.
Michel Barnier has made it very clear, Chequers just will not work. And that may be, that is, if you like, that is what Mrs May has said, here's my plan, and if they can find something positive in the plan, then Theresa May could work something there.
And she's meeting EU leaders again tomorrow. Haven't they squeezed in another quick 10-minute meeting before?
She would love it, I imagine. But in the meantime, I think she's simply just going to pocket the fact that Donald Tusk is here saying, said something nice, said it was a positive evolution. She's probably going to print that out and have it on her office wall or something to keep her going. Because, I say that genuinely, because for the last few weeks, ministers have been given by Downing Street these lines that, Varadkar and Angela Merkel said about Chequers a few months ago when they said, this is, a welcome contribution, which sounds a bit lukewarm. But, it's sustained them nonetheless, because they can say to MPs, to cynics, they can say, look, it's getting somewhere. It's credible, unlike all this Brexit Canada Plus stuff you're wanting instead. And what we're seeing there tomorrow, the real question is, are they going to suddenly say Michel Barnier is given the flexibility he requires to do a deal, or instead, the hope was, or the fear even, that they'll just say, no, actually, Michel Barnier is doing a great job. It's actually you have to be more flexible, more concessions, please. Carney's looking that way, though. This is the issue.
But the issue will always be the Northern Ireland issue, because Mrs May depends on the Unionist Party to survive. On the customs union and others, you could fudge it in some way, have border checkpoints in somebody's office or something, or however these border checkpoints now work with electronic checking and all that sort of thing,
yes.
But with the border, I mean, that is such an emotional issue.
Oh, quite.
And that's not easy to fudge.
And right now, so the DUP are very jittery about this, because what the EU keeps saying is, well, we could just do a border down the Irish Sea. I mean, we could have all sorts of... They're trying to soften it, to their credit. They're saying, or de-dramatise, in Michel Barnier's words, and saying, well, we have all sorts of checks using technology, it's going to be great, very sort of light touch.
This was magical thinking, though, wasn't it?
This is the thing.
Months ago.
Brexit is saying, hang on, this is the border for the north-south on the island. Why is this okay in the sea?
What I think the EU hasn't worked out is that there is a combined Irish rugby team and a combined Irish hockey team. So perhaps they could work on that and say, you're not as divided as you are. So, perhaps they could have some sort of a combined border in some way.
There's a thought.
That's smart thinking we need.
Let's move on to the Telegraph. An arresting headline here, Chequers, quote, as dead as a dodo. So, Mihir, who's saying this?
This is Michael Penning, who orchestrated Theresa May's campaign.
So a loyal ally.
Yes, and who was given a knighthood by the Prime Minister. So Prime Minister
very loyal ally.
Yeah. But he said some very damning things. He said that the Chequers plan, of course, will not work. It will not go through Parliament. And he's accused the Prime Minister of playing Russian roulette and treating MPs as naughty children. I mean, these are pretty serious words for a former ally and a person who thought that this woman would be a good Prime Minister to be saying. So, and he's actually joining the Jacob Rees-Mogg group of MPs and so on. So he's gone from somebody...
He's been alienated by Downing Street, this is the thing. And when you see why Theresa May, for example, was on Panorama earlier in the week and saying, oh, it's my deal, Chequers, or no deal Brexit at all, / no Brexit, it's blunt, it's offensive, Mike Penning is basically saying, and that's why he's saying, I'm being treated like children. And the thing is, it's tempting, Mrs May's allies might want to think, okay, maybe he's a lone wolf, but the thing is, I've spoken to other Tory MPs who, have genuinely been and officially are allies, sympathetic to the Prime Minister, but they sort of say in private, they've expressed concern about how sort of more closed off she is, how sort of, her antennae are not quite so sharp as they are these days, and yet she really needs them to be working, her political antennae to get her through. And so right now, the fact that she sort of makes these suggestions of, you're accepting Chequers, or you're going to even worse things, it's no wonder people's backs are put up like this.
Isn't she going around the tea rooms and talking to the MPs? Isn't she doing all that? That's the moment when Prime Ministers lose control.
Well, she's having people for dinner over at Downing Street instead.
But maybe the dinner's not very good.
Well, it's smoked salmon scallops, all sorts of things. I mean, I don't think it's the food that's sitting well with the Brexit policy.
Well, carrying on with the Telegraph, because so they're also talking about a memo, which clearly the Telegraph has seen, suggesting that Theresa May will face a challenge in April, and not just that, naming the runners and riders. So who are they?
Yes, well, all sorts of the usual suspects you may conclude, and that, and essentially the author, we can put it very frankly, is rather catty, saucer of milk for him or her, because Michael Gove is on manoeuvres, Philip Hammond thinking he has a chance, the author says, but not a hope. Liam Fox fading. Just, that's their assessment. Boris Johnson, bookies' favourite, but again, won't make it. Matt Hancock, a favourite of Mihir's, and I can understand why. He's a social media app creator, enthusiast, but this also
and a good cricketer.
Very ambitious too. Oh yes, very, very good cricketer. But so there's all sorts of very candid, frank, and unflinching assessments. And the thing is, there's a caveat I should make clear, is that this is not saying that there definitely will be, right, April the 1st it's happening, that we're going to go, chaps. It's just someone's raising a flag, sort of suggesting this could well happen, and the thing is it taps into a wider feeling that, Theresa May's job is to do Brexit. And after that, she's not really got much of a vision beyond Brexit, so certain MPs, it's what's been keeping her critics away from trying to remove her. They'll derail Brexit.
They seem to be suggesting here that it's a committee that will call her in and say, it's time to go. Here's a gun, we're going off, shoot yourself, rather than the MPs writing letters asking for a vote of confidence. There seems to be a sort of arranged resignation.
She did say to MPs after the election that I got us into this mess, I'll get us out of this mess, and that I'll serve for as long as you want me. So I think there is very much an understanding.
But she's also said, I'll take you to the next election.
But she has to, though, because otherwise I think people are a dead duck, or dead as a dodo even. But
neatly done. Let's move on to the Sun now, and I think we can all see what they've done with their headline here. Too little, too latte. Mihir, this is they've, yes, as the Sun said, been roasted by the Sun at any rate. They've paid £4.5 million tax on £162 million profit. Now we should say that of course Starbucks says it pays all its taxes, but I can see this might annoy some people.
Yes, what they're paid in tax is 2.8%, which all of us would like to pay if we could get away with it. And the problem here with the Sun is it says boycott call on tax dodge, which seems to suggest or implies this is tax evasion. It's not tax evasion, it's tax avoidance. And we have two issues here. One is Starbucks presents itself as morally and socially responsible, providing us with the sort of coffee we want and using the products and all that sort of thing. And is it being moral? It's based in our country, used our resources, and they paid little tax. But the other question is, do we have the right tax system which allows Starbucks legally to pay so little tax? So if you have Margaret Hodge saying Starbucks should pay more, then she as an MP, or though I know she's in opposition now, but why don't the MPs change the tax system so Starbucks can't get away by paying just 2.8% in tax?
That is a good question, which I don't necessarily expect you to answer, but I'd be interested on your thoughts. I think a lot of people will listen to that and think, well, yes, why not?
Well, obviously, Starbucks make clear that they're, paying more, actually, than they were back in 2012, when Margaret Hodge famously shouted at them into paying a bit more, and they kind of got a checkbook out and did a voluntary contribution to HMRC. But this is obviously gave rise to the fact that you can't really have a tax system dictated on, public opinion and berating of people just going, right, you should pay more, no, you should pay more, sort of thing. So it's where, as I do agree with me here, actually, that there would need to be, the trouble is, the really boring truth is that it requires, restructuring, simplification of the tax system. But, there have been efforts to do this.
No, but I think we have gone through about the last 30 years the idea that if you reduce tax, you increase business opportunities. It's a good thing. And I think the whole moral climate, if you like, the wider climate is changing. But people are saying, no, that is, given the cuts we have, the crash and all that, people are saying, no, perhaps the tax system itself should change. But whether in the present situation that will happen or not is a different matter.
What would be the effect, for example, if you were, let's say, to hike corporation tax, obviously Starbucks would argue that they have to pass on the cost somewhere, and that would be, in hiking up the cost of coffee and making sure, the lattes would be even more expensive. So the Sun, I could imagine, would be running different headlines like, "Are making a mockery of customers." They can't win, basically.
Okay, let's move on to, something else that's going up is inflation. And Mihir, it's defied forecasts and gone up more than the economists thought it would.
Yes, and this is because the rise in fuel prices and the rise in clothes. And of course, the Bank of England has been worried about it, which is why it raised the interest rates to cool the economy down. The only good news from people on this scale will be those who have had a lot of savings and haven't seen the banks pay any interest at all since 2008. Now, whether the banks will actually start paying more interest is debatable.
Yeah, question, isn't it? They haven't
That'll
shown
take
any
take a
desire
long
to
time.
do so.
But what is rather
to now.
contradictory here is that the rise in house prices is coming down, particularly in London. And since the crash of 2008, house prices have been rising dramatically in London.
Yes,
because people from Qatar and Russia and so on coming in, and maybe it's all the Russian influence. The Putin brigade is leaving London in droves, and therefore the house price rises is declining.
Your thoughts on inflation, Asa?
Well, obviously, I note with interest that the economists quoted in here say quite rightly that they believe that inflation will still likely fall shortly. It's not going to be soaring onwards and onwards and onwards.
But why should we believe them? They got it wrong last month.
I know. But even then, it's
you can't trust experts, as Michael Gove said.
They're not sort of going back through abacuses and saying, "Hang on, we need to do this right again this time." But I'm going to show on in Brexit, I'm afraid, because obviously how it's my job. But some of it might just be uncertainty over the negotiations. Now, once that starts to settle, then maybe it might start. The cost of living will be more adequate and acceptable, and everything will be looking more rosy.
Okay, let's finish with an arresting headline in the Eye. Genetic testing on the NHS. So, Mia, what's this? This is children and people with blood cancer among first to benefit from, quotes unquote, the holy grail of health.
Yes, that's the phrase used by Dame Sue Hill, who's the Chief Scientific Officer for England. And what it's basically saying is that there'll be study of genes and the DNA, and that will be used to actually, if you've got a tumour, look at the genes, and therefore, if you like, you'll get individualised treatment rather than a general treatment that you get at the moment, and therefore you can more specifically tailor it to what is happening to a person's body, and the treatment therefore stands a much better chance. And this is quite an important and very significant development in making sure that diseases are cured, and diseases that often are killers.
And the point is it, Asa, that this testing service is set to be rolled out across the NHS in England?
Yes, and the thing is, we're used to many headlines of, moaning about the NHS, waste, bureaucracy, it's old, it has more fax machines than, email systems, you name it. It's good to see it's innovating, and that it's trying to embrace this thing, because genomics will be transformative, as they're saying, and to be able to understand things and diagnose problems like we've never been able to before, particularly as they're now focusing on children and people with blood cancer, the wonders, it could be enormous. And obviously, who knows where it ends practically, given that, if people are trusting doctors with their genetic data. And then there may be a whole sort of, like with Facebook and data security, sort of genetic data security practically.
But also it's welcome in the sense, in the old days, genes have been used for racial theories, but now genes are being used to help human beings and help, cure diseases in the positive way.
We must leave it there, and I'm impressed you didn't even bring genomics back to Brexit. So, with more time, I'm sure you would have done. That is it for the papers tonight. Don't forget, you can see the front pages of the papers online on the BBC News website. It's all there for you 7 days a week at bbc.co.uk/papers. And if you miss the programme any evening, you can watch it later on the BBC iPlayer. A big thank you to Asa Bennett and Mihir Bose. A big thank you to you for watching. Until the next time. Bye-bye.